Here we are, Bill.
Here we
are live. We are live. You're like, who are these guys? Well, welcome to CMO Huddles Studio, made possible by our friends at Raystream. We are Bill and Bryan from the Advanced Selling Podcast.
I'm nervous today, Bryan. I'm nervous.
I am too. Well, and the question is, are we nervous because we're hosting and taking over someone else's show?
Exactly.
Are we nervous because there's a bunch of marketing people that are going to tell us how much salespeople suck? But that's the thing. Now, Drew's in a little cool place. So Drew, who you normally see here, is in the Galapagos. And I thought, isn't that where like Charles Darwin went?
That's exactly
right.
That's exactly
isn't that
right.
where he studied all the So I don't know what Drew's doing. I don't know if he's on the beach or if he's studying those birds. There's like special birds that live there, aren't there?
There are, but he's probably got his little Wi-Fi antenna listening in to make sure we don't screw this up.
He might be, yes. But we're very, very gracious that he asked us to come in and sit in. So hey to everybody, and we're guessing you're here because you're either a marketing person to hear our fabulous guest talk about marketing and the relationship between sales and marketing and sales enablement marketing, or you're a salesperson and you want to hear if Bill and I can hang with the CMOs, which
I don't know.
Time will
tell. I was listening to some past episodes to kind of get a hang of how Drew's really good. Drew and I are really good at this.
Yeah. How about that intro? That intro video was awesome.
And he was asking questions, and I'm like, oh gosh, I don't think I can ask a question like that. And every time he'd ask a question, the guest would go, oh man, Drew, that's a good question. I'm like, oh, are we going to be able to hang with him?
Can we hang?
Yeah.
Can we hang? So, so we're going to talk about marketing and sales today, how they go together. We got some great guests. We're going to bring them in here in a moment and meet everybody and then rock and roll from there. Good on that.
Yeah. So for those of you who don't know who the heck we are, we host a podcast called the Advanced Selling Podcast, and we have for 17 years, 11 million and some downloads, and a lot of people on LinkedIn. And we talk mostly in that podcast about sales, but I've noticed that over the past few years, we're kind of wading into the marketing world because a lot of times the sales team is also responsible for lead generation, marketing, positioning, things like that. So even though we're sales guys, we still wade into that those intrepid waters of marketing sometimes. And I'm really looking forward to this because I learned a lot just listening to some of the past episodes.
100%. And I think all of us need to get focused here on the same problem. We're all in the same business. We're all looking to help customers and improve the results for our own businesses at the same time and pick up a check for that because we're capitalists. That's part of the deal, right? And there's so much angst sometimes between marketing and selling, so much finger pointing. We're going to kind of let that all dissipate today and see like how can we come together, right? That's what this is all about. So let me see. I would also say, just as a little statement up front, for those of you who've listened to our show for a while, we're actually kind of marketing oriented. Would you agree, Bill? Like,
I think so. Yeah. As I said, we're kind of wade into that. Yeah.
Yeah. I think we, number one, we see the value of personal branding for salespeople. We talk about that all the time on our show. We do it. You can kind of tell by us and our pod. We've had a podcast for 17 years. We're big into that. And we think it's the best way to take messages out into a marketplace is through branding and marketing and that sort of thing. So we're really excited to be here. It's going to be awesome. So, but like you said, a little nervous, these CMOs are really smart humans.
They are. And I was telling my wife, I said, it's kind of like we're stepping into Drew's home here and we're having to run the home. And she says, well, it's a good thing he's not a heart surgeon. We would be lost if he was a heart surgeon. We're trying to come in, but he's a podcast host, so we can we can handle
that one. Yeah, it's good. So ready to meet some guests?
Yeah, let's bring it. You want to introduce?
Let's go. So where's our friend Peter Finter? Peter, what's up?
Hey,
Peter.
Good morning, Bryan.
Welcome.
Hey, Bill. Good to see you all.
Yes.
Hey, everyone.
Peter, the CMO of CyberGRX. Welcome back. How you doing? Where are you and how are you today?
I am in wonderful Silicon Valley, right here in the heart of crashing banks. And all things good. We can get into that in a minute. If we can combine Silicon Valley Bank and Chat GPT, we got ourselves a hot podcast episode right now.
That's true.
So, great to be with you guys. CyberGRX is actually based out of Denver, Colorado. So I spend my time traversing ski locations. It's pretty awesome.
Smart man. Now, you've got some sales experience in your past. So can you talk about your early formative experience in sales and how's that has helped you as you run marketing at CyberGRX.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And you're right. I did spend quite a bit of time in sales before I got into marketing. But even before that, I was in engineering. So that's a really wild ride to go through that. But, I got into the sales space because I recognized that this is where all the action is. It's right there in the interface with the customer. It's the engagement with the customer where all the energy is. And frankly, all the excitement is. One of the best things about being in sales for me was just that high experience of closing that deal, of being there in that moment, of seeing the lights go on and wanting to replicate and repeat that across a broader scale is one of the reasons why I got into marketing in the first place. But I think one of the things that really struck me about the world of sales is just how much rests on the shoulders of that one person, that seller. The responsibility that they have, the pressure that's on their shoulders is so enormous. They simply cannot be successful on their own, and nor should we ask them to be. And that was one of the things that I took away, which is how important it is for you to be able to work with the team and to bring the resources to the table. No one can know everything about everything. And to your point earlier, there are a lot of smart people in our organizations. How can we leverage them in the selling experience? And one of those groups of smart people should be your marketing team. So for me as a seller, it was really, how do I get marketing to help me? And frankly, they didn't do all the help that I wanted. And so that one reason why I ended up getting back into marketing or moving into marketing was because I thought to myself, somebody's got to be able to help these guys out. And that turned out to be me.
I love you taking the flag. It's great. Go ahead.
That's what we find a lot of times when we go into organizations. We typically work with a VP of sales and sales team, but a lot of times the marketing department is less than. They're not really doing the job. So I have a question. How do you ensure in your organization and others you've been in that sales and marketing really do work together? What are a few tips you can leave our listeners with?
I think the first thing is really about shared goals and success criteria. Like, how are you measuring your success as a marketing leader? How is we know how the salesperson's success is being measured. They're the most visible, transparent people on the planet from that point of view. But the question really is, how much skin is in the game? Because I think we're all familiar with this concept. One of my former bosses used to describe it as the blazing green scorecard. Marketing would come up to the QBR and they would show their quarterly results and everything looked amazing. They hit all their lead targets. Everything was awesome, but sales missed its number. And that kind of disconnect is the root of all evil as far as sales marketing relationships are concerned. So first thing is you've got skin in the game. The second thing is there clarity around roles and responsibilities? A friend of mine used to say, accidents happen at intersections. The reality is it's where those handoffs are occurring. Where is the baton being passed? If both of you enter the intersection, you're bound to have a collision. If neither of you enter, then there is no communication. There's a gap. It'll fall through the cracks. I think the third thing is mutual accountability to each other. What are we holding each other accountable to? And are we willing to be vulnerable with one another? That to me is the best relationships I've ever had from a marketing sales point of view, is where there's a willingness to acknowledge failure and weakness and address that together. If you can own it together and say, okay, we have a problem with messaging, we have an issue with pricing and packaging, or we aren't getting those events to deliver those results, or our lead quality is suffering, we have too many fake leads getting into the mix. If you're willing to acknowledge those things before one another, that's a huge sign that you actually have a working relationship that can go well. And the last thing I would just say is regular communication and cadence of meetings. Make it a regular thing. If you are waiting for your partner to call you and you don't call them, guess what? That's not a working relationship. So those are a few thoughts based on my experience.
Brilliant. We love doing the podcast because we always learn stuff. I've never heard that accidents happen at intersections.
That's exactly right.
It's unbelievable. I'm like, I've never, ever heard that. So that's stolen. Thank you, Peter. And I'd love for you to say baton over and over and over, because it's so beautiful when you say baton instead of my American version. So that's just fantastic. So let me ask you this, because I came from Procter & Gamble, big marketing driven company, and I was in sales in P&G. Now we felt, to Bill's point, at P&G as a salesperson, I felt lower than marketing. Marketing really ran the brands and Tide and Crest and that sort of thing. We were just sort of like catching everything, that sort of thing. And the rub we always had, and I want your comments on this, was marketing is never set in our shoes. They don't get what's really going on. I feel like you do. That's why you're here and why we're talking. Could you give the CMO audience and the sales audience some advice or some insight into that you don't understand me vibe, that feeling? How do we break those barriers down?
It's a great question, and it's not an easy thing to answer because, as you know, if you've not walked in the shoes, you really don't know, and maybe you will never will. But you can get close to it. And I think one of the things that salespeople can do to really help marketers is to bring marketers into their experience. It's like, come along on that call, listen in, or even just review call recordings. You know, many marketers now are running BDR teams, and maybe that's for the first time in their careers. They're starting to understand a little bit more about the sales experience, because that BDR team really does sit at that intersection. It should be 100% part of sales and 100% part of marketing to be effective. It's a special place. But whether that exists or not in your marketing world, get your sellers to engage you directly in the customer experience, not just to the happy customers. Get them in front of the tough ones, the ones that are really putting the screws onto the sales guys, and live that world. And the more that you can take that on, the more empathy you're going to have, and the more likely you are to be able to respond to the asks that come from your sales team.
That's brilliant. Love that.
I love the intersection thing. Back to that real quickly, because there's that marketing sales intersection where if the salesperson shows up with a message totally different than what the marketing message was, then we're out of sync, we're out of congruence. And the other place that happens is with the BDR, the business development person who's making the calls, and then they pass it over to the salesperson, and the customer sometimes is like, well, where did Peter go? I had somewhat of a relationship with Peter, and now I've got Bryan here, and and so I think that's really so critical that people hear that, and then you ask yourself, well, where are the intersections in our business that we're not taking care of and we're not mindful of?
Yeah, that's good. So last thing, Peter, what is working? We've talked a little bit like, okay, what do you do when it's broken, it's fixed? So tell us, please, at CyberGRX, what is working in the relationship between marketing and sales?
I think I'll go back to what I said was important in the relationship. I think the fact that we have a shared vision, we have a shared strategy, and we are problem solving together, I think is huge. And that really is a team sport. And we are a high growth company. We've added a lot of people into our sales team, a lot of new leaders. So we're constantly having to recreate and continue that kind of spirit, but introduce other people into it. That's not that easy to do. But essentially, if you can build partnerships at every level, and I really can see that happening at rep to field marketing, at sales leader to head of demand generation, CRO, CMO, if you can get those layers all synced up, that is enormous. And I would just go back to my BDR team for a second. Really effective, 100% in sales, 100% in marketing. Those are some really great things. And as a result, we've got a lot of confidence both ways in the team that we're standing shoulder to shoulder, that we're both responsible for the outcomes, and we take the pain together, but we also celebrate the victories together.
It's one team. It's one team.
Same thing. That's what we said. Yeah, everyone's after the same thing in the end, aren't we?
Yeah.
Peter.
Yeah.
Awesome,
Okay,
Peter. We're going to let you
in a little bit.
We'll let you go to the green room. There's some M&Ms in there and some wine.
You're going to love the snacks. We did read your writer, Peter. So we do have the titanium straws, and the blue and gray M&Ms have been sorted.
Appreciate it, guys.
So let's bring on Sara Larsen. Sara is our second guest. There she is.
Hello. Hi, gentlemen.
Hi, Sara. How you doing today?
How are you?
Glad to have you here.
Same question. Where are you? How are you?
I believe salespeople are people too. So it's okay that you're my friend. It's okay.
Thank you.
Thank you. I'm good. I'm gonna leave.
We love her. We love
Thank
Sara.
you. You're the best. Thank you, Sara.
I'm in Boston today.
Austin today or every day or all days?
Boston, not Austin. Boston.
No, yeah, Boston. Do you live in Boston? Are you from there?
I do. Yeah.
Born and raised.
Sitting in Lexington today, just outside of Boston.
Oh,
beautiful.
Cool.
Love Boston.
Well, we just talked to Peter Finter a little bit, so we'll ask you some of those same questions. What kind of background did you have in sales before you launched your marketing career, or did you have one? Because that's kind of our line of questioning here, is how sales and marketing coexist and get along and get the goals accomplished. So tell us a little bit about your.
I don't think I've ever been smart enough to be in sales. So
I've
tried. I had my early sales career with multi-channel distribution of Girl Scout cookies. So there was that.
Oh, yes.
But probably one of my more formative experiences on the sales side was earlier in my career in setting up online commerce and helping. I was at IBM at the time and helping IBM set up their first online commerce program and taking, traditional selling models and products and solutions and services and getting them into an online store. And that probably fed a lot of my interest in just understanding, how do people buy? What are different buying behaviors. And as you know, in e-commerce, it's marketing and sales and CX all sort of smashed together into one space. So got a lot of taste of several domains in that role, and then moved more into the marketing side.
So when I introduced you, I neglected to say who the heck you are. So let me go back. Sara is VP of Marketing at Wolters Kluwer Health, and we won't start all over, but I forgot to say that. So
yes, okay. Well, thank you for
no
that.
problem.
She's in marketing. She knew, Bill. She knew. So
Yeah.
we've got it. We branded like it's part of the branding. So
Yeah.
what about the? Yeah, go ahead, Bill.
Go ahead, Bryan.
I was going to ask about because we talked earlier about the relationship between sales and marketing. You probably heard that when you were in the green room eating the blue and silver M&Ms, as I know you were. Talk about it at Wolters. How's the relationship? What's it like? What's working? Talk about that a little bit.
It's interesting because I support 3 different sales teams, and they all have 3 different needs. It's like, I don't want to call them 3 different children with different needs, but you could imply that. And I think you have to have a foundational alignment, right? You have to have foundational alignment at the business layer. Peter talked about that around aligned to pipeline, aligned to the revenue stream. But then you have to go a little deeper on what are the actual needs at that point in time for that sales organization. I mean, I have one organization that's totally focused on new business in not as mature markets, another organization, highly mature market, big renewal business, a lot of focus on renewal and upsell, right? So we could be aligning on a pipeline number for those 2 organizations, but they have very different needs, from marketing. A third organization is going through work to get very segmented, hyper segmented, and much more targeted. A lot of marketing needs there around targeted campaigns, new data, new messaging, et cetera. So, you can align on the numbers, but you have to align on what's behind the numbers too.
That's a lot of stuff.
So
that's a lot of stuff, Sara. That's a ton.
Bryan and I have a common friend here in Indianapolis, and he runs a digital marketing agency. And he says the role, and I'd like to ask you this: the role of marketing is to make it easier to buy and easier to sell, make the product or the service easier. What is the role of marketing at your company? Just a kind of a 30,000-foot view.
Say 30,000-foot view is to, one, there's the business contribution, right? That is just rock solid. We have to contribute to the, pipeline of revenue. But I think how we do that is really through what value of our solutions. How do we communicate that not just in a marketing campaign, but in all of our customer touch points between marketing, sales, and even thinking about our CX touch points and life cycle. And that's probably the number one thing. People don't call me up and say, I need more leads. They call me up and say, how can I communicate with even more value to this particular role that is now on the buying committee? And that role wasn't there 2 years ago, and now I need to communicate to that role. So that's where I spend a lot of my time.
That's an evolved sales team, if they're asking you that, because a lot of the teams I think Bill and I interact with are a little more selfish. They're like, Sara, where are our leads? We need more leads. We got more leads.
And I think that's the other thing I think marketers are learning. The relative source of the lead and why a lead is a lead, marketers have to explain it. I can't just tell you, hey, Bryan, I gave you 10 leads this month. I gave you 10 leads. 3 of them were coming out of finance. We know those people buy this way. 3 of them were coming out of IT. They're junior, but I know that you've got to call them because they're going to be your data gathering right now to do a presentation up to their CIO. And so marketing has that buying committee insight, and they've got to get that to sales faster. It can't just be a toss over the fence of a lead in sales.
Yeah.
It's so great, isn't it? You used the word support earlier. I don't know if you knew you said that, Sara. I support 3 sales teams, 3 sales functions. That mentality alone, to me, is extremely encouraging and refreshing. So
I've found if marketing thinks they're better than sales, or sales thinks they're better than marketing, like neither of you are going to win. Yeah. Neither of us are going to win.
Totally.
At the end of the day, an aligned team wins when we get that buying committee together and we close a deal. And it takes a village on that. And I don't know, it's so funny because we spent all this time, you've probably seen all these charts on buyer journeys, and they all look linear. Right. It's like marketing steps here and sales steps here. It's like, it doesn't work that way, right? It's like a layer cake, and it all has to come together at the end.
So
Yeah, I see salespeople's eyes glaze over sometimes when you start talking about the buyer journey, and
Yes.
it's
Right.
one of those terms that's been used and used. And could you define that for us? Not necessarily at your company, but no, because I think everybody needs to understand exactly what is it. I don't mean specifically, but just generally, give us a definition of the buyer journey.
So I think the buyer journey is who are the people that are going to be in the influencing and decision phase of your product or solution.
Love
And
it.
what are those roles and what information needs do they have? What pain points do they have? And then how are you going to respond on value to those? How are you going to say, look, you know what, I hear, Bill, that it's really hard for you to do X, Y, and Z. And that probably means that you're thinking about a solution like this. Can I tell you what value we provide? We've solved some of those problems in the past. We'd like to figure out how we could solve yours. That's the buyer journey. And you can look at all kinds of ways to bring that conversation to market, emails and events and all kinds of tactics. But at the end of the day, you have to have that value message that speaks specifically to the pain point of someone on your buying committee.
Yes, it's brilliant. Bravo. Okay, we're going to come see you here in a little bit. You get to go back to the green room, right?
Back to those M&Ms.
A little bit. Exactly.
Yeah, sure. If Peter hasn't eaten them all, he probably has consumed them all. But anyway,
yes,
you let us know if they're not there.
Oh, that's so great. I love it. Drew's going to come back and go, what did you guys do with the M&Ms? Now I've got all my guests are asking me for these special things.
Well, I was thinking, you and I love music, and I thought, well, maybe we could play some music, as we start. And then I thought, no, he'd probably get in trouble from some licensing thing.
Right.
You'd get the whole thing crashed.
We get Drew sued.
Exactly. Thanks,
Okay.
Brian. Thanks, Bill.
Next guest, Bill. We're bringing our next guest.
Next guest, and I'll do a better job this time, Brian, I promise. Next guest is Carlos Carvajal. He is CMO of Q2, and he is on the screen. And we had a chance to talk to Peter just a little bit before we went live. Carlos, welcome.
What's up?
Hey, Bill. Hey, Brian. Good to speak with you again.
Exactly, right.
Like 15 minutes.
Where are you and how are you? I know the answer, but I want you to tell our audience. Where are you and how are you?
I am in Austin, Texas, and I'm doing awesome. But it's a good time to be in Austin right now.
Awesome.
Different than July, August when it's like 110 degrees.
Yes.
Right now it's all good.
So as
everybody's moving to Austin, aren't they? I mean, it's either Nashville, Austin, Miami Beach. Isn't Austin like huge influx of population now?
Yeah, Austin's horrible. Like they should stop.
Horrible. Yeah, exactly.
Terrible here. Absolutely terrible.
I just want to know where
a lot of people moving in for sure.
It's funny. Okay, so we're talking sales stuff today, Carlos.
Yep.
So I want you, if you can, just go back in your own career. Usually, not always, usually some marketers have had some sales experience. Can you go and recall any sales experience in the past and what you learned from it and how you use that now in your role as a CMO?
Yeah, just briefly. So I've worked with sales a lot in different roles. So did a little bit of development, spent a lot of my career in product, right? So with product teams up with salespeople a lot, especially when you're just how you deal with clients, prospects, et cetera. Then shifted into marketing. But I did have a brief stint in inside sales, right? And part of it was we actually wanted to pilot and see if we could sell a certain solution, which was fairly complex, and do it entirely over the phone. And so basically went through that for about 6 to 9 months, but then the company ended up getting acquired and that experiment pretty much ended at the point of acquisition. But did learn some interesting things along the way. It's kind of funny, a lot of times when you come from product and even from other orgs, you're thinking, hey, we have the best product. Why aren't we winning? We should always win. Like product capability, all this kind of stuff. And it's a different mindset. And when you actually are in the role, and I think Peter said it well, there's just so much like to the deal and everything that can go on, things that can go wrong. Do you have the buying committee involved? Are you talking to the right people? There's change, there's organizational change that comes in that can mess up a decision. So there's just a lot of learning that you really appreciate once you're actually in the role, things that influence deals. But one takeaway that I had that really hit me is when you're going through a deal, let's say a process for 4 to 6 months, and you're going through a bunch of calls and you got to stop and think, these prospects are talking to you and they're probably talking to 4 or 5 other vendors and they're hearing a lot over that 4 to 6 months. So at the end of the process, I'm talking to these accounts And I'm thinking, man, they have so much in their head, so much they've captured, so much written down. How do we really succinctly put together why us, right?
Yeah.
And that helping with the proposal and late stage, content, things like that. I hadn't really thought about that normally in marketing, because you're thinking in many cases higher up the funnel, right? Back to Bill's point, like leads, where are my leads? I need messaging, I need sales decks, I need this, I need that. And that was one takeaway. I was like, we got to look down the funnel, to Sara's point, as far as the entire buying journey, because a lot of times it boils down to that last decision when they're sitting in a meeting room having that debate, right? And how do you actually plant something at that point in time that actually puts the decision in your favor? So that was one takeaway.
That's brilliant. And that, to me, like these days now more than ever, because of the mass ability to get information at our fingertips, people are bombarded and they need ways to sort it out, don't they? At the end, especially because they're hearing all these messages. I've never thought about that way too, because we kind of plant marketing people up front, don't we? And it's really great to hear that.
Traditional focus, yeah. And
the
thing is, what do you want to land right at the most critical point in time is decisions.
Absolutely.
Carlos, what's one thing that a sales team, it doesn't necessarily have to be at Q2, but over the years you've been working with sales team, what's one thing salespeople just don't understand about marketing and the function they should play? And that question was not on the script here, so I'm coming out of nowhere.
Exactly. Carlos is like, did I misread the prep sheet?
Hey, Bill, the audio went out. No,
exactly.
I can't hear you.
All good. So basically, one thing that salespeople don't understand, and then what was the second part of that? I just missed the second part.
What is one thing that salespeople don't understand about the role that marketing plays, and how it can help them? Because marketing is there to help support, as Sara said. What's one thing that maybe it's a misconception that salespeople have about marketing?
Yeah, I mean, I'll give kind of the easy answer, and then I'll dive deeper into maybe a few other areas. But the easy answer, because it goes beyond sales, quite frankly, is it's the classic brand awareness, right? The PR and the relationships with your analyst community and the relationships with other folks, right? Which takes investment, right? And those are decisions that you have to make. How much investment do we make in PR? How much investment do we make in awareness? How much do we? Because if you ask them, it's like, put it all in lead gen, hire more inside sales reps, right?
Yeah.
So sometimes those are underappreciated. And there's a science behind that where you can directly correlate what your demand gen conversion rates look like based on your brand strength, the awareness. Do they know you exist? Do they know what you stand for? All those kind of things influence demand. And that, I don't expect them to really appreciate that level of detail. But there is a balance there that you have to strike.
Yeah.
I love the idea of the science behind it too. I think that is, as a sales, person in my core DNA, we're so like, just like, I need this. We don't think through the depth of things. I use the pharmaceutical world as an example here, because there's part of me that goes, and my sister-in-law is a high-performing pharmaceutical rep, and she basically delivers Chick-fil-A to doctors' offices for a living. And I'm thinking, surely to God, this can't be worth it. And when I talk to my friends at like Eli Lilly or Merck in the marketing side, they're like, there is so much science behind the results that we get from delivering food to nurses. It works. When we don't, the scripts go down. So I think that's really good, Carlos. And I would agree with you on that.
That's a great point. And that was the other part, is just, there's also a lot of things around the programmatic side of marketing, the machinery behind marketing. I don't expect, like, salespeople got to sell. They're busy. So I don't really expect them to understand all that. But it is important as far as to how you optimize results, how you scale the organization, and all those types of things, right?
I've got another question that's off script here. What's the meaning of life?
When's the last time we're ever taking over a marketing podcast? These marketing people are also much more like prescriptive than salespeople are sometimes. And they're thoughtful, and we're just like all over the board. So we'll get back to it. So tell us, what is working? What's working at Q2 right now? But the relationship between marketing and sales, what's working?
Yeah, I think the key there and what's working, and it's a journey, right, is the relationship itself, right? And then that leads to everything else. So what I mean by that is, coming in, right, I joined Q2 about 2 years ago, and very successful sales organization, like actually, hitting their numbers, doing really well without a lot of support from marketing from a demand generation perspective, right? So that means change is hard in that situation, because like, it's working, like we're doing things is great, right? So what I need are, nice looking PowerPoints. I need these things, et cetera, right? It can't fault them, right? So if it works, so establishing trust through the relationship building, and then everything that Peter and Sara mentioned as far as you go through that journey and basically saying, what are the priorities, getting alignment on the priorities, reviewing results. And I couldn't agree more on some of the comments earlier that you can't just come in and start talking about, look at all these leads that we're generating. At the end of the day, it's about pipeline and bookings and pipeline and bookings and pipeline and bookings, and speak their language first. And then everything else is more of a means to an end around those two things. And just building that kind of relationship and trust along the way. So with that, what we've done is we make sure that we have pretty close to alignment. There's always some flex in there with the sales leadership team. And we go through plan reviews every quarter, and that could be from campaigns, field, and all these different things. So we make sure that we align on what we're doing from a planning perspective. One of the things that the sales team did that was really helpful from a sales enablement perspective is they built out a sales center of excellence team, which didn't exist 2 years ago. And they partner with marketing on enablement. And it is so important to have somebody that's in the sales organization that has those relationships as well, because they can lean into the organization and help a lot, right? So we partner, and the primary partner there is more around product marketing, especially around content, messaging, all those kind of things that factor in with sales enablement. And then the next level down is, okay, it's great that we're aligned on priorities. It's great that we're aligned on the goals. It's great that we have a way to work with a sales center of excellence. But if you're not aligned day to day with the individual sales reps, like forget about management, right? It's feet on the street. And that's where the field marketers come in, right? The field marketers are the ones that are really tightly looped in from a communication perspective and collaboration perspective, feedback cycles, all that kind of stuff. So just making sure we have all the different layers covered is really important. And that last loop is huge, like just having that really tight connection with the reps, the individual reps, and the field marketers play a key role there.
I've never heard of an idea like Sales Center of Excellence and working directly with enablement. So what we tend to do, Bill and I do, is we tend to steal ideas from other people and go share them and get paid for them, Carlos. But we always give credit. So thank you for that one. Everybody, we're exactly okay. But really, it's great. But that's a really, really smart thing to do. I love that, to maintain alignment.
So, Carlos, we're going to send you to the green room. I want you to work on that question that I asked, the secret to life. And when we come back, we will be at
a movie. It's like a Monty Python movie or something, right?
It is a Monty Python movie, actually, isn't it? The History of Life.
So we're going to take a break. And thanks, Carlos. We'll see you here in just a few minutes. And we're supposed to talk about the Advanced Selling Podcast right now for a GIF. Bryan, what do you think of the Advanced Selling Podcast?
Let's do it. So, so those of you who don't know, so this would be for all of our marketers listening, all of our salespeople. So Bill and I have been hosting the Advanced Selling Podcast, as Bill said earlier, for 17 years. We were one of the very, very first sales and business podcasts that ever existed. And we are the longest running for sure. Download wise, we're pretty up there too. And people say, how'd you do so well? I said, we just outlasted everybody. We just consistently kept producing the podcast every week. And it's essentially a 15 to 20 minute show with a very moderate amount of humor at the beginning. And then typically a very, very tactical or reasonably tactical sales bit of advice working on a real-time problem. We have nearly 900 episodes, I think, Bill, something like
it's over that, but
1,000 something. It's a big library. We have an app, so you can go to the Advanced Selling Podcast, go to the App Store, get the app. So if you're listening, you're a marketer, I would forward that app to all your sales teams. Say, hey, listen to these guys. These guys are okay, and they're marketing friendly. And then we got a program. You want to talk about Insider a little bit, Bill?
Yeah, Insider is a special group of people who come together once a month for an hour and 15 minutes, and I work with them. We do coaching on certain parts of the sales process, personal branding, the right questions to ask, how do you master the first call. Everything is sales oriented, primarily for business to business, or high-end business to consumer. So that's an insight. That's the Insider. You can find out more about that at advancedsellingpodcast.com/insider. There's a QR code, I think, that Melissa has up there. So thank you for that. So it's a highly engaged community. I mean, both our LinkedIn community, where you have about 11,000 people, and also the Insider program, and our listeners are great. And so hopefully some of them are on now. Speaking of highly engaged communities, we're going to bring in the show's producer, Melissa.
Hey, Melissa. Tell us about CMO Huddles.
Hello. All right. We're going to turn your cameras off. You guys can go have your M&Ms. And let's bring Sara, Carlos, and Peter back in, 3 of our huddlers. And I'm going to do a little CMO Huddles plug since Drew's not here. So here we go. Launched in 2020, CMO Huddles is an exclusive community of over 100 highly effective B2B CMOs who share, care, and dare each other to greatness. One CMO described Huddles as a cross between an executive workshop and a therapy session. And given how hard things are getting out there, who doesn't need a little reassurance that they're not alone? Everything about CMO Huddles is designed to be a force multiplier, helping you to make faster, better, and more informed decisions. Since no CMO can outwork this crazy job, CMO Huddles is here to help you outsmart it. If you're a CMO who can share, care, and dare with the best of them, check out cmohuddles.com. And since we have 3 huddlers here, we wanted to ask you if you're on the therapy side or the executive workshop side. And if you want to skip that question, we'll go straight into if you guys have any examples of how CMO Huddles has helped you.
Oh, definitely on the therapy side. I would say, and I'll specifically call out a time when I was between jobs and CMO Huddles offered a transition huddle. That was really helpful. And what not only was it helpful to me, but actually I was able to help a couple of other people in that. There's nothing quite like being in it together when you're going through tough times. And I would say that's really where CMO Huddles has shown up for me. And when I'm back in employment, being alongside of folks going through the same pains that I am, huge, great ideas and great support.
Great. Thanks, Peter.
Yeah, definitely therapy side for me as well. There's real high trust factor amongst the group, a lot of sharing and low ego. So if you can find high trust factor, low ego, you can get a lot done. So I enjoy the group and Drew does a great job.
Yeah, it's been fantastic. Joining the meetings, I think we're all facing very similar challenges at different points in time, sometimes common challenges at the same point in time. And one example of that was around the Great Resignation and a lot of the challenges around hiring and just crazy salaries and all these other things. And I actually was able to use like some of the data points from the email summaries and things that were coming out with my HR team to justify some of the things that we needed to get done from a talent acquisition point of view, which was super helpful. So that was one. And then one other thing, and I cannot remember the name of the person that shared it. I'm drawing a blank right now, so I apologize. But there was a quote that somebody used in one of the meetings around, I want the experience for my team to be the best experience they ever have. I want this to be the best marketing team that you're ever part of, and you felt like that was a great experience. And I actually just use that with my team. And we have a program called Be the Best Marketing Team, which is more about the people, right? And how we take care of the people. And that was a direct idea from CMO Huddles that came out. We've been using that now for over 18 months. And it's been a huge help, actually.
Oh, that's amazing. That's great. All right. Well, thank you all. I'm going to hand the floor back over to Bryan and Bill, and you guys can get back to sales enablement.
Welcome back.
All right.
Hey, team. Everybody's all full, sugared up, right? Gotcha. That is funny how that occurs, isn't it? Okay, so before we get into the questions, we're going to ask the 3 of you as a panel. We did get one question, and Sara, this is kind of a test. I'm just going to warn you. From a listener, someone that's watching, that just wanted to know what specifically do you sell? What does your company do?
What do I sell? Good question. So Wolters Kluwer, they're a 180-year-old publishing company that has made the pivot into information services and applications. And so we sell expert solutions to help professionals in a variety of fields. So I'm in the health division. And so we help clinicians, providers, payers, PBMs, nursing, really anything in the health space with information and applications to help them do their jobs. We also support tax and accounting, GRC, legal, and we have a new ESG division that we just launched. So expert solutions.
Love it. Been around a minute. So, balanced time here. We're a balanced show. Everyone, gets to say their piece. So same question to the 2 of you. Peter, you want to go next? What exactly do you all do?
Yeah, CyberGRX actually is the world's leading provider of cybersecurity risk information. So we operate an exchange. It's a 2-sided exchange. We have over 13,000 members who are sharing risk information to help improve supply chain integrity and reduce overall risk to ecosystems. Cybersecurity professionals used to worry all about what their employees were going to do to them. They still worry about that, but now they worry more about their third parties, because 2/3 of all of their breaches come through a business partner who has access to information and networks. We exist to help everyone do a better job of solving that problem.
Brilliant. And Carlos, same question.
So Q2 is the leader in digital banking solutions. So you can think about anything that a consumer, an SMB client, or even a corporation would need to do with a bank, that's all gone digital. So basically what we do is we provide the software that powers all of that for them.
Fantastic. Coolest part about I think, is our business. What Bill and I do is we get to learn all these businesses. You're like, there's even, it's just fascinating. Different ways that people can make a living these days. So, okay, let's get back to it. Marketing and sales. The lines are getting blurred. One of you mentioned, I think maybe someone mentioned the idea of like BDR, SDR roles are now under marketing. There's this big debate. There's a CMO in Indianapolis. His name is Kyle Lacey. A lot of CMOs know Kyle. So I happen to be friends with Kyle. Kyle said, Bryan, I want you to come talk to me. This was 5-6 years ago. He's like, I'm thinking about taking SDR, BDR into marketing. What do you think? He just wanted some outside perspective. What do you all think? Is this a good thing or a bad thing that the lines are getting blurred between selling and marketing? Good or bad? Let's start with Carlos.
I don't think it's a bad thing at all. I think that at the end of the day, one advantage of putting the BDRs with marketing is having just complete accountability of lead generation, demand generation. That can help with that. But I'll also say, I don't think it should matter at the end of the day, right? If you have that relationship, you have shared goals, you understand what you're trying to achieve, it should work in either model, right? Is my take. But if it comes into marketing, then there is clear accountability on the demand gen side. Yeah.
Sara? Thanks, Carlos.
Right. So I think it's a great question, but I would pose it more to what does the customer care about, right? They care about that everyone in their touch points has a consistent message, that they know how to get value from the people they're talking to. If your organization tends to be highly sales intensive, BDRs probably make sense to be in the sales organization. If you tend to be very inbound driven and need to spend a lot of time up front, qualifying and really helping to understand and educate the customer, BDRs probably make sense in marketing. So I think it really depends on what you're selling, where the customer journey is at, and what makes the most sense for the customer interactions.
Bravo. Peter, what about you?
I think, I would, just to broaden it back out to the lines between sales and marketing blurring, I think it's not a good thing if there's a lack of clarity. If you're not clear who's on first, then you're likely to drop the ball, and that's not great. On the other hand, it is a good thing if you can team effectively, and that teamwork needs to start from who is on your team. I think often we think about our teams as our functional silos, but something that's really helped me is to think about my peer group as my first team and my functional team as my second team. Now, my own team members might not feel so good about that, but actually it works amazingly well. When mom and dad have a good relationship, the kids feel right? And actually we can make a difference there. So I actually really appreciate the fact that we can look at situations, identify what those issues are, and then decide who's the right person to take it forwards from there. That's a shared experience that we can deliver, for our teams. And I think everybody gets along better when that happens.
That's brilliant.
We've had some really good comments. So if you have a comment, make sure you make it, and I'll read a couple of these. Rosemary says, when I ran field marketing, a few jobs jet back, the inside sales, which would now be termed SDRs, reported directly to me, really helped to crystallize the campaigns that drive results. So kind of echoing a little bit of what you guys said. Yes. I've got a question on content. Sales requests content, and however you define content, the marketing person or the marketing department is usually responsible for coming up with it. And then they don't use it. And so the question becomes, I know that's not universal, yeah, it is. But how do you look at content when it comes through a request from the sales team? Tell me a little bit about the role content plays in your relationship with sales. Peter.
Yeah, I would say that, first of all, content is an increasingly important part of what marketing is about. It's probably always been that way, but now we've actually got a discipline around it. It's started to raise its head a little bit more. But I think the way I think about content development is there's a difference between explicit needs and implicit needs. When a salesperson comes to you, they're telling you something that they see a need for. That's an explicit need. If you're a good marketer, you're going to understand something about the implicit need. So when you say to me, I need this, is that because what you're hearing from your customer is X, or you see a gap? in the process, or we're not able to explain something well and you're looking for some help. So I would say to marketers, do the work. Understand your buyer, understand the personas in your ICP, understand the use cases, and build messaging and content that aligns with the jobs to be done. Because ultimately, we're trying to help customers do things better. We often have to reframe their thinking, and then we have to show them why our solution matches the needs. If you can build that foundation, you're going to have a much more fruitful conversation with your sellers about what's going on. The second thing is listen to what they hear. So go and do those joint calls, review those call recordings. If you have your BDR team, find out what happens in real life, not just in your head. Marketers love to live in their heads. Get them into the real world. It definitely helps improve the content they deliver.
That's awesome. Sara or Carlos, would you like to weigh in on this question?
Sure. I have this belief that in marketing, content is our product. The outcome is going to be pipeline and, revenue, but we create content. That is really what marketers do. And you have to think of content creation like you would creating a product. So if someone's coming to you and asking you for a product, and 50 to 60% of the time when you give it to them, they're not using it, you have to look at what are the why is there not a product market fit here for your product. And so as marketers, we have to apply the discipline that we have in product marketing to really get underneath what's the question behind the question of why does sales need this content? What's it looking to address? And then measure. You got to measure the effectiveness of your products. So I apply that product marketing discipline to thinking about content.
Yeah. Carlos, got anything on this?
Yeah, those are great points from Peter and Sara. I'll just add a couple of things. And it's funny, Bill, when you ask the question, this is a hard challenge at every company I've ever been at, right? When they say, how do you actually get people to use the content, et cetera, right? So back to that sales center of excellence, the SOE has helped with that a lot because we make sure we get them involved in the process when we align with the sales team as far as what are we going to deliver. Because part of it is writing the content, aligning with a buyer, aligning with the needs, getting all the subject matter experts involved. But you need to have an enablement plan. Like once you build the content, what are we doing to actually to roll it out? Do we have formal plans around that? And then how do we know any of it's sticking? Like, are we actually going to train on some of the knowledge capture and things like that? So just making sure that you kind of go beyond producing the content and think about the full enablement plan behind it. And if you can't get alignment on that, it's not really going to work.
That's really good. And I'm not gonna admit in a public forum like this that I may have destroyed 4,000 pounds of marketing collateral when I left Procter & Gamble. That these marketing people, with much smarter than I, spent years and years compiling. I'm not going to admit that I did that, but I'm guilty. Okay. Let's stay on the topic of sales enablement. So let's talk about what makes a successful sales enablement program that plays well with marketing. What are some good things, and how do you prioritize the sales enablement function and their priorities and their initiatives with your own? And I know, Carlos, you already gave us a little color on the thing that you did, which is really good. So I'm going to start with Sara. What are some good sales enablement tips or ways to work well on the sales enablement marketing front, Sara?
Yeah, well, I think there's probably two things. One, I think marketing plays a key role in driving that red thread of messaging into and through sales enablement. You have to bring that into whatever methodology your sales team is using, but stay consistent with the message for your customers. Think about who's on the buying committee, who's the influencer, what are their care abouts, what's their pain. And then the second that I've learned painfully as I've gotten more deeply involved in value enablement is if there's no pain, there's no change. So you really need to understand where are the sales teams having pain today. That's where to target your sales enablement. And it might be different team by team. There's no one size fits all. So really zero in on the pain of where your sales teams are struggling. And that's where you should spend time on sales enablement.
That's great. What a great perspective. You're treating your sales team like your customer. I just love that. Yeah. Peter, what's your take on this one? A good sales enablement program.
Yeah, from my perspective, I would say that marketing is always storytelling, right? Our job as storytellers is to tell the story of our brand and to engage our prospects appropriately through marketing channels. The alignment of that message and the way we tell our story to the way that salespeople tell that same story face-to-face in front of their prospect, digitally or in person these days, that is a critical opportunity, I think, for sales and marketing to partner together to deliver that. So whether that's your first meeting pitch deck, which is never actually used, but the story that it tells is what matters, and what you want the salesperson to remember are the customer success stories and the key nuggets. Whether it's that or it's a new hire boot camp and actually the role play that goes on in that.
Yeah,
how much can you bring it to life and make that work and have marketing deeply involved in that. And then I would just go back to my point about personas and market segmentation. Every time that you decide to look at your market differently, ensure that you have sales in the core team, right? At the very beginning, because ultimately the most important thing about enablement is adoption. We can create all the best things in the world, and if nobody cares to use it, it's a waste of our time. So start with the end in mind. If you want it adopted, have sales involved from the get-go.
I really like that idea. I've got a client who I'm working with. I just started working with about a month ago, and one of my assignments was we need to get better at the story of how the company began. What kind of resilience had to occur for the company to be prosperous today. And I asked each of the people, there was 11 people on the call, tell me about the story of this company. Tell me about how it started. And the president of the company was on the phone, on the call too. And there was stone silence from these 10 people. Stone silence. And the president spoke up and said, I am appalled. I am appalled that you do not know how this company started and what travail, what we've been through to get to this point. And I'm also appalled at why you can't tell that story. Because if you can't tell that story, how's a customer really going to see themselves in that story if you're not telling it? Mm-hmm. And I thought that was, so when you said story, we hear a lot about story. Everybody's talking about story, but I'm not sure how good the sales team is at telling the stories of our companies. And I'm not sure how good the marketing teams generally are in infusing them with what that story is. So I really like that, Peter.
Bravo. So let's go to, we'll go like a kind of a speed round here because in the end, someone mentioned this earlier, that this is all about the outcome in the end, because we're all in business and we know the environment we're in, especially on the technology side of the world these days. Let's just talk KPI and measurement. So how do we measure impact? Marketing efforts on sales enablement and overall revenue. How do you measure impact? Give us a KPI or a two or three word phrase there, Peter.
I would say quality pipeline is the single most important factor for me. Ultimately, our job is equipping sellers to be able to identify and create real opportunities that they can close. That's it.
I love it. Carlos.
Pipeline.
Love it. 3 pipelines. Pipeline cubed. Sara.
I'm going to say win rates and faster deal cycles.
Love it. You're speaking to salespeople when you say those, all 3 of you. Like, I'm a salesperson. I'm like, yes, thank you. It, it tells me, I'm a little soft here. You get me. Thank you.
Yeah. So we've got about 3 minutes left here, and we really appreciate Peter, Sara, and Carlos joining us today. And thanks for Drew and the team at Renegade and for asking us to be on. I want to finish with just some words of wisdom based on the future of sales enablement. You can go sales enablement, you can go marketing, you can go marketing sales, but what is a trend from your standpoint that is happening that we need to be paying attention to in this whole conversation? So I will start with, well, actually, I'll let you guys decide who wants to begin. Who's got the courage to step up and say,
I'll jump in.
Words of wisdom.
Right. I think CMOs are going to be called on more and more to drive value enablement. I say value enablement because it's about the communication of value across the life cycle of a deal. And so very practically, I would say if you're in the marketing leadership roles, learn sales methodologies, understand how sales is selling today, and figure out how can you bring more value and value messaging into those methodologies and approaches.
That's awesome.
Love it.
Peter, Carlos?
I'll go next. I'll say generative AI. I told you ChatGPT should be part of the podcast. I think it is going to transform the world as sales and marketing people, because we talk about smart people. Well, now we have smart machines. They're not that smart yet, but they're getting smarter every day. And the reality is they can transform our world, and we better figure out how to do it and where to apply it. What does that really mean for us? I recommend starting with your messaging and your email marketing. Give it a chance, and you'll be amazed at how apparently smart it appears to be. So how do we take advantage of that? I would also say competitive intelligence is another area where we can leverage technology like AI much more effectively, but it needs to be consumable for your reps. If you're going to overwhelm them with new sources of data, it's going to be unused. So let's be thoughtful about it. But that's something we all got to get our arms around.
Awesome. Carlos, finish it off here for us.
Yeah, I was going to mention something similar, but I think part of the challenge with adoption and just usage of things is just making it easy. Like, how do you make it easy to find what somebody's looking for? And that is a big challenge. And that's where I think AI and other technology can come into play. Peter mentioned ChatGPT, because I think the easier you can make it for somebody to find, I need a piece of content that's going to help me with this type of deal against this competitor, et cetera, right? And if we're actually experimenting with that now, where we're actually putting that into our systems where people can just type in a phrase and then it comes up with recommendations on the things that would be most helpful. And that has been a big hit.
Awesome.
That's good.
I'll say one thing, you take us out, Bill. I just want to say thank you first to all of you. And just know this, we respect what you do more than we ever say. I promise you, the salespeople love you and respect you. They just don't know how to express it sometimes. So thank you so much.
They're all
Thank
bottled
you.
up. They can't share
Seriously.
feelings. They're all bottled up inside.
Take us home,
Well,
Bill.
thank you. Thank you to Sara, Carlos, Peter, and thanks for the audience too. We love you guys. And if you want to check out the Advanced Selling Podcast, we'd love to have you there. Drew will be finishing his vacation. He's probably on his way back right now after hearing us. He'll be back from the Galapagos in 2 weeks for a show all about go-to-market strategies. Guests will be Bryan Law, Amanda Malco, and Sangram Vaire. And I'm sure I mispronounced his name, but we thank you all for listening and watching. And thanks to our guests. And we welcome Drew back when he gets back. Thank you all.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you.